Okay, so maybe you were following the Delphi case, and maybe you even thought from what you were hearing, they didn't have a very strong case against Richard Allen. But then, voila, the jury came back with a guilty verdict. And you're like, what? And then you start seeing all of these hashtags. What does that even mean? Because didn't the jury get it right? I mean, it wasn't televised. I wonder why it wasn't televised. And reporters were not allowed to even record, take pictures, or anything in the courtroom. 0 devices allowed. Okay, then. Well, in my opinion, there are a lot of reasons they didn't want information out there. Now, I'm going to break it down to you in a series of smaller events so you can see what I'm talking about. And it'll give you time to digest one thought at a time. But this time we're going to be building a case against the justice system. Now, as you know, the prosecution's whole case against Richard Allen hinged on the idea that he encountered the girls on the Monon High Bridge. They crossed over to the south side of the bridge where he unalived them shortly thereafter. However, there are key pieces of evidence that were strangely omitted, not only from the search warrant, but also from the trial. And this information raised very serious concerns about the integrity of the investigation and the case against Richard Allen. The first one we're going to talk about today is geofencing. Geofencing data. Okay, you don't know what a geofence is. Well, let me explain it to you, kind of condensed. You know that when you use a cell phone, that receives a signal from a certain tower, right? We've seen that in a lot of criminal cases, and that's also how your GPS locates you. But what you might not know is that it's not just a broad area. Okay, that's where a ping comes from, a certain tower. But geofencing is something that is way more precise. What geofencing does basically is it makes a grid, kind of like those little things that you did in school, the graphs. It's an invisible grid over areas. So they can tell by the geofencing data, not only did it come from a certain tower, but exactly which little square in that area that phone was in at a given time. Wow, they really are watching you. Now, in the case of Richard Allen, there was geofencing data for that specific area of the crime scene close to the Monon High Bridge. And this was crucial to the case because it showed phones in that area at the time that the prosecution claims the crime was committed. It didn't just show one, but 3 cell phones in that exact area. Oh, well, that should have been case closed, right? Yeah, the kicker is none of them were Richard Allen. What? You mean there were 3 people at the crime scene at the time of the crime and they weren't Richard Allen? Nope, they weren't. However, the prosecution petitioned Judge Gull to say, we don't think this is relevant. We don't want this in the trial. Of course you don't, because that evidence would have been exculpatory. In other words, it would have excluded Richard Allen as being the perpetrator. Oh, but that would have contradicted the state's theory that Richard was the sole perpetrator and the only one at the crime scene. Well, that would be a problem, wouldn't it? Of course, the defense argued that this evidence was crucial to the case. But Judge Gull said, nah, it's inadmissible. Now, there is one more significant thing about the data on the cell phone that we're going to talk about right now, and that is the testimony of Sergeant Mitch Blocher of the Indiana State Police. Who is Mitch Blocher? You don't know much about him? Yeah, well, thank you, Judge Gull. In a conversation with the Delphi Police Department, Officer Steve Mullen on February 13, 2017, Blocher stated that his interpretation of cell phone data suggested that the victim, they're talking about Liberty German, it suggested that her phone was no longer in the area or no longer in working condition. This conversation occurred between 9 p.m. and 1 a.m. on February 13th, during the time the prosecutor's timeline places the phone at the crime scene. What? They knew from Mitch Blocher all the way on the 13th that that phone was either not in the area or not in working condition, but yet the prosecution would have you believe that that phone remained under Abby's shoe, which was under Libby's body. But I don't get it. Yeah, neither do I. Now, while some people want to say that it wasn't in working condition, look, if you've ever had an iPhone or any kind of cell phone, you know that is a bunch of bogus horse crap. Because if your phone has water damage or is not in working condition, it's not just spazzing out, right? The whole phone goes dark. It's off. Y'all who have had to put your phone in a bag of rice like I have, we all know that. It takes a while, and when the phone is in workable condition, you have to power it on. So it's not just not in working condition. And then, voila, the next morning at 4 a.m. or around that time, it comes back on. Why, it is a modern miracle. Okay, so that is the first thing I want you to think about. There were other people in that area at the time of the crime, according to the geofencing data, and they know who those people are. What? So why aren't we talking to those people? I don't know. You tell me. And whatever you do, stay silky. Bye bye.